Hello, this presentation is presented by the North Jersey Junior Lacrosse League. It's designed for our coaches and the Garden State Lacrosse Official Association referees. And this particular presentation is related to sportsmanship. As we get ready, though, there are some documents everybody should be familiar with. We have the National Federation of High School Sports Boys Lacrosse Rulebook, the USA Lacrosse Boys Youth Rules, and the NJJLL Playing Rules. Now, the four documents that you see here can all be found on the league website, njlacrosse.com/2025. So, sportsmanship. The NJJLL and all youth sports are losing officials. Retention rate for new officials is less than 30% after the first 3 years. So this is not unique to New Jersey. This is not unique to lacrosse. This is a problem nationwide in all sports. So you see the numbers here, 230 to 170. In 2020, our league had 230 officials working youth lacrosse games. We now have 170. That's down 60. That's down more than 25%. And the reason is adult behavior, the way the coaches are acting, the way the parents are acting. So again, this year, the NJJLL is encouraging the officials to take a zero tolerance stand when it comes to the conduct of parents, coaches, spectators, and players. Officials are encouraged to call more unsportsmanlike conduct fouls and ejecting anyone who chooses to yell at the game officials. So something as simple as, "Are you kidding me, ref?" That's a flag, right? There's a right way and a wrong way to ask a ref about what just happened on the field, but when they start with negative comments like this or with an attitude, then start with the conduct foul, move up from there. So any referee will tell you it's a fact that if a coach is actively yelling at us, it's way more likely that the fans are going to be yelling at us too. The coach is convincing the fans that the refs are not doing a good job. So coaches set the tone at the contests with their displays of sportsmanship. And in youth lacrosse, coach is responsible for the conduct of their coaches, players, and spectators. So coaches aren't always aware of what's going on in the stands. Certainly, if you're made aware of a problem, program directors, if you're made aware of a problem, you need to fix it. And a guy like this shouldn't be showing up from game to game. You know, this woman's thinking, oh, that dad's an issue at every game we attend. So programs and coaches need to identify the problem fans early in the season and address them accordingly. Somebody like this shouldn't be there games 2, 3, and 4 if this is the way they choose to act. Any referee will tell you, I've thrown a fan out of a game and had other parents/fans of the same team clap that they were being ejected because they're tired of listening to it too. So what we're encouraging here is tell your parents that if there is somebody like this in the stands, to let you know, let the program director know so that they can be addressed so that they're not attending game after game and acting like this. So because of the increase that we've seen over the last couple of years of ejections of both coaches and players, any coach who is ejected now is suspended a minimum of 2 games. Instead of in the past, it had been 1 game. So their game they're getting ejected, and then the next 2 games on their schedule, they'll be sitting out. A coach who is ejected needs to leave the premises immediately. So this 2 games is a minimum. If a coach tries to pull something like, oh, I'm not going anywhere, anything like that, well, you can count on this 2 games. My recommendation is going to be that it goes up from there. And then after a game, that's not the time to approach the officials, whether you want to talk about it, whether you want to apologize. We don't approach officials after the game. We don't approach them as they're walking off the field. We don't approach them in the parking lot. If you really feel like you want to get a clarification, get your side of the story, you want to apologize, you go home, you write an email as a coach, you send it to your program director, and your program director will forward it to the league assigner. And again, any coach who touches an official in an aggressive or threatening manner can be suspended from the league. Now, keep in mind here, the touching, how it's interpreted is really only depends on how the official interprets it. We had an issue a couple years ago where a coach never got ejected, but apparently the game didn't go well. And after the game, the coach came up and put his hand on the referee's shoulder to talk to them. And while the coach thought it was a friendly gesture, the official was very upset about it. So again, not a good idea to approach the referees after the game. the thing to do, go home, write an email, let everybody calm down. But if you go up and you put your hand on the referee's shoulder or touch them in any manner and they weren't happy about it, it can cause the coach being suspended. So, just so everybody's aware of the progressive discipline for sportsmanship violations by a coach. The first offense of a coach being ejected, he's suspended the next 2 games that are on their schedule at the time of the ejection and a fine to the program. That's up to the program whether they pass that fine on to the coach or not. For a second ejection in the same season, the fine goes to $500 and the coach cannot be on the sideline the remainder of the season. Reinstatement must be requested in writing from the program director, and reinstatement will be based on the NJJLL board review and approval. If a coach is ever ejected again, and every year after the first 2, they're banned from the league and another $500 fine to the program. Any ejected coach cannot be on site for any game during their suspension. So if they're a dad or a mom, they can't be in the stands, they can't be in the parking lot, they can't be there. And what this says is nothing prevents the discipline committee from enforcing additional sanctions based on the severity. This is progressive discipline, but if what a coach does is so bad on the first offense, the league could decide they're done. So again, this is the minimal progressive of discipline, but nothing says that the league can't step in after the first offense and decide, nope, that coach is done. So, what can be considered unsportsmanlike conduct by a coach? Well, obviously, the yelling at officials. There's a right way to ask an official, sir, what did you have there? Sir, what did you see? But yelling at officials, begging for calls, things like that, never going to be acceptable. Can be unsportsmanlike conduct to encourage overly aggressive play, making comments like take him out, make him pay for that. Ref might decide to warn you once, hey, coach, that's not how we talk. This is youth sports. And then after that, hit him with a conduct or an unsportsmanlike conduct foul. Overruling the official's calls. And here's what we mean by that. So the official makes a call. He comes to the sideline and he's reporting, I got 1-1 white, 2-minute personal foul, cross check. And as the player's running off the field, the coach decides to yell out onto the field in front of everybody, hey, don't worry, Pete, nothing wrong with that. That was a clean hit. Well, okay. Well, that's an automatic another foul, and that should be an unsportsmanlike conduct. Nothing wrong if when the player runs off the field, if the coach really feels like the player got the short end of the stick there, they're absolutely entitled to counsel their player and tell him not to get upset about it. But that's done one-on-one, not yelling, not screaming across the field to show up the official. Yelling to players, that was a great hit, when now they're getting flagged for it. Unsportsmanlike conduct. And here's something that coaches need to understand, because when we do hit them with the foul for unsportsmanlike, they're going to say to us, oh, I was talking to my player. I wasn't talking to you. Or if we overhear something else, they're like, oh, I was talking to my coach. I wasn't talking to you. Well, the rule that officials go by is this. If you said it loud enough for us to hear it, you meant for us to hear it. And it's going to be adjudicated as such. So anything you don't want us to hear, you don't want to be consequenced for, you need to make sure isn't within earshot of us. Other things can be things like running up the score. That can be tough. Whether you're on the losing end, it can be tough. Whether you're on the winning end, it can be tough. Embarrassing the opponent. Things like excessive celebration. If you're up 12-1, the players shouldn't be celebrating like they just won the game in overtime every time they score a goal. So now let's talk about fans and spectators. So here's the progressive discipline for violations by a parent or spectator. The first time a referee hears something like this. Now, first of all, this is youth sports, meaning there's no site manager normally. Although I will say in youth sports, if there's not a separate site manager, the home team head coach is automatically the site manager. But the referees are allowed to address the fans if that's what they feel they need to do to get the game under control. But as part of rule, they can go to the head coach and give the coach an opportunity to talk to their fans. The coach may or may not take them up on this opportunity. It might be the coach is as big or a bigger problem than the parents themselves. If after the coach has been given an opportunity to address the fans, if they either did and it didn't work, or B, they decided not to do it, the referees now can assess, starting with a 1-minute non-releasable penalty to the team for the conduct of the fans. And on a second offense, they can give a 3-minute penalty and an ejection, and the referees can end the game. If the parents aren't going to knock it off, they're not going to stay there and take the abuse. The referees can end the game. Now, what we tell the referees we prefer As long as you've got a coach who's cooperative and trying to work with you and is not part of the problem, we would much rather you just eject the parent, spectator, what early on, as early in this process as you want, rather than consequence the kids for the conduct of the parents. But this is a tool that's there if needed to be used. And again, nothing prevents the game officials from escalating steps. Again, if a parent yells something so egregious first time, they can be ejected right away. They don't have to follow this progressive discipline, but this is, in the normal course of events, how we would expect it to take place. And again, nothing prevents the discipline committee from enforcing additional sanctions. If the referee writes a report, depending on the severity, the league may step in and tell the program, hey, this parent or spectator is not allowed on the sidelines for X amount of time. And so just as with coaches, we also had a great increase in the number of players suspended. Any player who gets ejected this year is suspended for a minimum of the next 2 games on their schedule at the time of the ejection. And then we also put in a rule a couple years ago that if an 8th grade player takes 2 or more unsportsmanlike conduct penalties during the year to where they're ejected, if they're ejected 2 or more times during the year for unsportsmanlike conduct, they're not eligible to play in the All-Star game. So, sportsmanship for players. We're also expecting them to stay to a high level of sportsmanship. Things like showing the palms. Referee makes a call, kid turns around, turns his palms up like, what did I do? Well, that in most cases should be at least a conduct foul, if not unsportsmanlike conduct. Now, as a referee, I'll tell you, coaches, if you've got a player that does this, you should be knocking it off in practice. You should be knocking it off. But when the kid does this, if I hear the coach yell at him right away, well, maybe I'll let the kid have a warning the first time. But certainly if he continues, he's going to get a flag. But if the coach is silent and I got a kid showing me his palms, basically that's a way of arguing the call. They're going to take some sort of foul. Pointing at the helmet. This could come the players cradling up the field. Maybe there's no contact. Maybe there's very little contact to the helmet. But now as they're still running upfield with the ball, they want to point at their helmet like trying to tell me I missed a call. Well, that's, for me as a referee, is going to be an immediate whistle. It's going to be, you're at least going to lose the ball. If I want to go conduct foul, if I want to go unsportsmanlike conduct, you're not only going to lose the ball, you're going to serve at least a 1-minute non-releasable penalty. Things like trash talking the other team, that's obviously can be unsportsmanlike conduct. Taunting, excessive celebration. Again, there's a way to reasonably celebrate goals. The rule is you're not supposed to draw attention to yourself. So if you're up by 12 goals and you score, you're not supposed to be dropping to your knees and dragging your knuckles across the ground or celebrating like you just won the game in overtime. So here's something that everybody needs to understand. As a league, when we get a report that a coach was ejected, we'll always get a report from the program, basically their side of the story. And unfortunately, far too often, the report from the program or the coach will go something like, well, if the officials had just called a better game, if the officials had just called a safer game, I wouldn't have had to yell. I was yelling to keep my players safe. Well, this video, this is here to tell you, coaches, that will never be a justification that allows you to yell at referees. If you don't think the game's being called fairly, that's your opinion. If you don't think the game's being called safe, there's a mechanism you can use that we're going to go over in just a second, and we can either fix that. But you will never be allowed to say, well, I was yelling at the referees because they weren't doing a good job, because my kids weren't safe out there. So if that's going to be your defense to getting ejected, you're really not going to be standing in good ground. So if a coach is unhappy with the way a game is being called, here's what they can do. If they're not happy with the way the game's being called, they can ask for a timeout to discuss with the referees the way the game is being called. Now, this can be done during a timeout. It can be done between quarters. It can be done at halftime. Right? If they're going to ask for this, by rule, the other team head coach will be present while you're discussing it. You could tell the referee whatever you want, within reason. And you have to say it respectfully. You can say, I don't think you're calling the game fair. I think there needs to be more penalties. I don't think you're keeping the kids safe out there. You need to be respectful, but you're going to get your opportunity to voice your opinion to the referees about how the game's being called. After this, and we restart play, If you're still not happy with the way the game's being officiated, the game can be ended. It can be ended by you as a coach. If you think that this is just not safe, okay, go home. Tell the referees we're done. Referees, if you think that now you're going to continue to argue because the game's still not getting called the way you, the coach, think it should be called, well, the referees can say, hey, we're going home. What I would probably do as a ref is say, Coach, you had your opportunity to voice your opinion. I'm telling you right now, the next negative thing I hear out of your voice, it is going to end this game and everybody's going to go home. You're not going to be allowed to continue to yell at the referees because you don't like the way the game's being called. So yelling to get calls is never going to be acceptable. And if you do get ejected, there is no appeal. It doesn't matter what videotape you produce, how many witnesses you produce, how many character statements you get. We at the league have seen it all. If you're ejected, you're ejected, you're ejected. There's nothing that's going to happen that's going to change the ejection and the suspension for the next 2 games. That's automatic. Same as in high school. So, hoping that we have a better year, hoping that we don't have to deal with a lot of sportsmanship issues. If you want to know more about this and more about the league, you can go to the league website at njlacrosse.com. There's several more rules documents up there. Also on our YouTube channel, there's several other videos about this season's rules. So I hope everybody learned something today, and have a great day.